Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, we need to be cognizant of the political and economic reality that America is facing, as well as the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, because they lost last electoral cycle, is currently losing and they currently are not sitting in power. That is to say, something has to be able to change and they need to be able to be even more privy and more nitpicky about the strategy of them moving forward into the next election cycle if they want to be able to have a chance at winning and be able to push back against the Republican base. That is to say, this debate is primarily about the lens of them looking at the particular elections and what exactly they want to be able to do in terms of positioning themselves at a relative degree of success. First degree of characterization of what their interest is. I think their interest is primarily trying to be able to find what playbook might be able to work coming into the next election campaign, not just politically, but also economically, especially in instances where they might not have as much funding or they potentially lost out to some people who swapped and went Republican. The second thing we have to understand is, why is this debate uniquely about Mamdani? It's uniquely about Mamdani because of how controversial he is, but at the same time, how he is quite effective in terms of New York City. That is to say, for once, the Democratic Party is actually being able to be cognizant and privy to the economic majoritarian realities of the things that face particular people. And for the longest time, with the Biden administration and even before that, a lot of them were largely very left-leaning outside that particular scope of the Overton window to the point of being a bit more radicalized. That is to say, yes, Mamdani is a Democrat, but he also is able to use certain strategies from the Republican or conservative playbook, like appealing to those particular people who are part of the working class, which in and of itself constitute a huge voter base in America that's important to be able to deal with. What is my argument? The first thing I have to say is that Mamdani effectively, uniquely leverages on majoritarian needs to be able to cater to the working class. Like what I said in my pre-oration, in many instances, these particular people can be a turning point. Hence why Donald Trump was so effective in his ability to be able to leverage those people under the banner of MAGA, trying to be able to pander to their economic needs and realities. Let's take a look what's happening right now democratically and in the own locale. I'll take you later in a bit. So we need to understand the volatile nature of what's happening in the global markets. We have a weakening American currency, we have the rise of China and India, and we also are starting to see even more volatility and cyclicality in the markets with the advent of things like inflation and other trade-related issues coming from rising geopolitical tension. That is to say, the majority of people who are important in this debate, who are a tipping point, are actually the people we need to be able to cater to and pander to. And we think that being able to look at that, especially from the lens of a Democrat who otherwise would not be fully cognizant of that, is something strategic to do. Before that, POI, go. POI, yeah.
All right. From Zohran Mamdani, it's actually turning from which I think is a very accepted opinion and diametrically opposite in the terms of the persona. And to further elaborate that question, how do you think a parallel between Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump would work, not just on a New York scale, but on the scale of...
Yo, it's like a really long POI. Your mic was kind of choppy. I can't hear it. But if your question is like, yo, why Mamdani? People don't like him. He might not get support. Yo, the Democratic Party doesn't necessarily like him. This debate isn't about liking the person or not, but being able to pick up whether you like it or not, specifically from his political and economic strategy, which is something that the Democratic Party needs to be able to consider. As what Albert Einstein said, right? Insanity is the definition of doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting the same result. And that's actually something that time and time again, Biden and all these other particular individuals tried to do over the past couple of cycles clearly aren't working given the essential sweep we've seen by the Republicans. Second thing I have to talk about is being able to effectively adopt this portion of Mamdani's playbook allows you to be able to work with a shoestring or a little budget and bootstrap your campaign from the ground up. This is relevant, especially since they didn't win last time, and it's possible that they might be working with an even more limited budget. They might be gung-ho, all excited to be able to come out strong and like hit it to the Republicans. But the reality is that Mamdani was able to do this with a very small amount of donors and volunteers. And in instances where they're able to prepare for the worst and be ready that, hey, we might not get as much funding as we did last time because we lost out on some corporations, we lost out on some people who switched side, or we lost out on some ultra high net worth individuals who were catered to by Donald Trump's economic reform and priority for the 1% are now lost. So, we came from an L last electoral cycle, technocrats are gone, and sources of funding are questionable. Adopting this lens and strategy allows us to future-proof the current campaign, and in instances where we do get more money, which is of course the goal, then that's great. But in instances where we don't, we're allowed to be conditioned to how we can work smart and be able to maximize those particular budgets. The impact here is that if they're able to come in with the worst case in mind, they become less likely to do shady things like what we've seen before. Being able to traverse along gerrymandering and try to be able to cater to certain individuals through things like vote buying or manipulating those particular electoral lines. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't want them to be overly desperate, and we want them to strategically be able to consider swing states that can turn the vote, like Rust Belt states and other particular individuals who switched Republican. This debate is uniquely about what mindset and what political and economic reality they need to do in order to be able to allow them a chance of success. I'm not saying they're going to win. That's not what this debate is about. This debate is about the current situation now in terms of how these particular people, particularly that party, consisting of a collective group as well as individual people, need to be able to rally themselves together, try something risky, try something different, in hopes of being able to say the Democratic Party you're going to see next electoral cycle isn't the same weaker, fragmented one you saw before. We have a chance to be able to win, and we can actually stick it to the Republicans. With that, we are very proud to stand inside opposition. Government, pro, yeah.